Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia here. Welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. Stage 4, Week 1 results. Okay, so we've had our first week in a 2-2 roll-lock, and I tell you what, there have been some results. Some really, really interesting results. Most notably, the lack of 4-0s is quite substantial. And a forewarning, I probably won't cover the stage standings much in this stage 4, simply because it doesn't really mean anything. I will probably cover them at the end of stage 4, but there are no stage playoffs, so it really doesn't mean anything, the stage standings in this stage, so I probably won't cover them that much, but the overall standings is where it's at. So, we will look at our results, and it was a big game to start off the stage. It was between Houston Outlaws and the Paris Eternal. Whoever won this would take an advantage going into the rest of the stage in terms of that run for the play-ins. And this actually surprised me. Houston Outlaws, they want to go dive. It's quite obvious they want to go dive. Muma seems to want to gravitate towards the Winston, and Coolmat wants to obviously gravitate towards the D.Va, and we are not seeing a massive amount of Roadhog, and that can be a drawback to a lot of teams. And this will be a feature going through the stage. If you don't have a really prolific Roadhog player, you might well suffer. So, suffer the Houston Outlaws do. Paris Eternal run the Oink and Yoink, the pulled pork, and that's my phone, so that should shut up. But they run the Oink and Yoink, and also they run the May, and that's going to be a trending thing as well. They get the win, Paris Eternal, 3-1 over the Houston Outlaws. This is a bit of a surprise, considering the Houston Outlaws had a good stage last stage. Houston, it's kind of a game you needed to win, really. Paris, that is a massive result. That's a massive result for Paris, and it brings them right back into the mix of things. So, it's not all doom and gloom, but it's not the start that Houston would have wanted. Moving on after this, we had the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the New York Excelsior. And I don't know what's going on between stages with the Los Angeles Gladiators, but they've decided that Hydration is now a main tank. So Hydration is playing either Orisa or Wrecking Ball, and that's another trend also. We're not always seeing Dive being Winston D.Va, we're seeing it sometimes being Wrecking Ball D.Va, which is not an enormous surprise. But Los Angeles Gladiators get a 3-1 win over the Excelsior, and I don't think anyone would have predicted that, considering New York Excelsior were expected to be quite powerful during this stage, considering the roll-lock. So, and if you can hear drilling, I can't do anything about that. I'll try and do it. I'll try to get rid of it in post-production, but there are people drilling outside my house. So, that's a brilliant win for Gladiators. That is a win I did not expect the Gladiators to pick up, and that does wonders for their playoff hopes. After this, though, we had a 5-mapper. Guangzhou Charge taking on the Philadelphia Fusion. This was a big teller of where Guangzhou Charge were at, and where Fusion were at. And I'm telling you now, spoiler alert, it's not been a very good week for Philadelphia. This is a 3-2 for Guangzhou Charge. Guangzhou Charge looking good. And I mean they're looking good. I would not want to play this team right now. It's exactly as I expected before the stage started. This is a team to be afraid of, even though they are not particularly high up in the league right now. But they are seriously looking at changing that during this stage. But they've got some tougher fixtures coming up after this week. Moving on, we had the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Vancouver Titans. This was a rematch of the stage playoffs, and yeah, Shanghai, they've got some adjustment to do, bringing back in an off-tank, which they haven't used in quite a while, in this form Envy, and later on in the week Guguri as well. It didn't look comfortable against Vancouver. Vancouver, though, boy oh boy. Vancouver we had our doubts about. I don't know why. They were historically very good as Runaway when playing DPS, but Haxel. If they did not have Haxel, I think they'd be struggling. I have seen fights this week, not just against Shanghai, where Haxel has carried this team on his back with his Genji Blades. He is getting 2-3 kills per Genji Blade. That is insane. Absolutely insane. I am wondering how the hell you shut down Haxel. It's actually crazy what he's done for the Vancouver Titans this week. So that's a 3-1 win for the Vancouver Titans against Shanghai. And it's not the end of the world for Shanghai. This is a game I expected them to drop. They just need to make sure that they win the other games they've got this stage. Moving on, after that we had Toronto Defiant taking on the Washington Justice. I expected Toronto to be better during this meta. I also expected Washington to be better, although Washington, they could play spoilers, because Toronto are the only one in this matchup that had anything to play for. And Washington do act as spoiler. Washington get a 3-1 win over Toronto. That is not good, Toronto. That is not good. Mathematically, you're fine, but you know, I'm looking at the fixtures, I'm looking at the teams above you and what they're doing. You're all but out. You're all but out. You just got to concentrate on getting some momentum for next season now. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Moving on, London Spitfire taking on the Dallas Fuel. This is an interesting one. London have had a resurgence in a problem they've had since basically they've existed, so their control problem. Hey, yes. London Spitfire cannot win on control, but they look gosh darn brilliant on other maps. They get a 3-1 win over the Dallas Fuel, but guess what Dallas Fuel win? This is the thing with Spitfire. I don't know what their thing is with control, but it is their kryptonite, and it's badly their kryptonite. It's crazy. And it's something, it'll probably see them through to the playoffs. Like, I'm not too worried about that. But it's something that in the playoffs you need to sort out, because that can shift the whole momentum towards a team. And then if that team against you's got momentum, and it's someone like the Vancouver Titans, New York, Gladiators even, San Francisco, you might struggle to get that momentum back. So it's something Spitfire need to work on, but a 3-1 win is exactly, well, they could have done with a 4-0, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. They got the win, and that's what they needed to do. Moving on, we have the Seoul Dynasty taking on the San Francisco Shock. No surprises here, San Francisco Shock get the win, 3-1. Again, we see some different stuff from San Francisco. We see a bit of Smurf, we see a bit of Architect, we see a bit of Striker. It all kind of works itself out with San Francisco. They've got such a deep roster with such a deep hero pool. And it's just amazing what they can do. Seoul Dynasty, they are not going to compete with San Francisco Shock. Their main aim was the game later on in the week. Moving on, we had the Philadelphia Fusion in action against the Chengdu Hunters. You know I said it was a bad week for Philadelphia? Yeah, and this is what I mean. They lose 3-2 to the Chengdu Hunters. That is not good. That is basically automatic playoff dooming. That is a game you need to win if you want automatic playoffs, and this week may have just put that in a coffin. So Philadelphia, you have got a lot of work to do in the rest of the stage if you are going to catch up to the people up there now. I'm talking about London Spitfire mainly, because they've managed to open up a 1-win gap over the rest. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do for Philadelphia Fusion. Chengdu, though, that is a massive win for Chengdu Hunters. Massive win. Moving on, Paris Eternal taking on the Los Angeles Valiant. This was an absolute... Oh, God. This game was something else. I might do an extra look at that game. I honestly might do. Some of the stuff I saw out of Paris was not even contenders level. Paris were bad at times during that game, but Valiant were as well. But Paris is, especially ult economy and ult usage, it was just, oh boy. But space back for the Valiant actually is looking really good. 3-2 to the Valiant, and honestly, it was winnable for Paris. Very winnable. But you play like that, you're not going to win against anyone, so yeah, that's something we will have to look at in more depth if I do, because it was pretty bloody shocking, to be quite honest with you. Moving on, we had the Guangzhou Charge taking on the Boston Uprising. Now, I'm not surprised that the Guangzhou Charge get a 4-0 over the Boston Uprising. Boston Uprising look completely out of sorts. I am not expecting them to reach the play-ins now. Just the way they look like they're playing right now, it just seems very disjointed. It's unfortunate. I wanted to see Fusions do well, but he seems to be uneasy on Nerissa, and that could hurt not only his play-in chances for the Overwatch League, but also his World Cup chances. because there's numlocks locking on the door for that one as well. But fantastic win for the Guangzhou Charge, and what a week for that team. They have stormed up the league. Not surprised. I am not surprised. Moving on, though, we had the Los Angeles Gladiators taking on the Houston Outlaws. You know, I said it's been a really weird week. Yeah, this is it. So, the Gladiators come out this stage, and they managed to beat New York Excelsior. So everything's hunky-dory there. But then they go and lose 3-1 to the Houston Outlaws. Yep. Yep. Dunno. I just... Triple 2 is gonna really provide us with some wacky games and some really weird results. And this is one of them. This is just one of them. Yeah, that's a bad result for Gladiators. It could have been a really brilliant week for the Gladiators, but that has really turned it on its head. It's unfortunate, but it's the way the cookie crumbles. It's a win that Houston really needed, though, after losing to Paris. They needed to pull off a shock win, and they got it. They got it. Moving on, we had the Atlanta Reign in action for the first time against the Hangzhou Spark. So, this is interesting. I have had doubts about the Hangzhou Sparks DPS lineup, and they've lost Crystal. Well, they haven't lost Crystal. They've had to punish him because he's still not back yet. Whatever you think about that situation is up to you. But, yeah. Atlanta Reign looking good on the May and the Reaper, and they get the 3-1 victory over Hangzhou Spark, and this is worrying for the Hangzhou Spark. They need to adjust quickly, because otherwise they might fall out of those playoffs. Their map differential is not on their side. It's actually less than London's now. It's less than Seoul's definitely, and they need to pick up the wins, because otherwise we might see them in the play-ins, and you know, a knockout tournament, anything can happen. But brilliant win for Atlanta, exactly what they needed, and maybe that can give them a bit of momentum going through the stage now and try and pick up one of those play-in places. Moving on after this, we had a very crucial game. It was the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Seoul Dynasty, and this would have big implications on who would reach the playoffs, in my opinion, because there are two of these games this stage, and you know, Shanghai needed to prove themselves after the loss to Vancouver. These teams needed to pick up a win, really, because they'd both lost. Obviously, the Shock also lost against Seoul. But Shanghai, they just looked the better team. They looked by far the better team compared to Seoul. They get the 3-1 win. This puts Shanghai in a great position, and it's been a bad week for Seoul. No beating around the bush. It's not been the easiest of weeks for Seoul, but it really doesn't get much easier either. So, Seoul still yet to prove any consistency and to prove the quality that they need to get into those playoffs. Moving on after this, our champions are in action again as the London Spitfire take on the Toronto Defiant. And London's woes on Control continue. They lose the first map, which was Ilios, but they end up storming the rest of the maps. So, 3-1 to London Spitfire. No surprise that they beat Toronto, but really, this is the sort of game you should 4-0. But London, they just can't play Control for some reason. They just can't do it. It's a weird one. It's a real weird one, but it's definitely London's kryptonite. And this worries me that if London have to go to a Game 5, they'll be on Control again. And that's never a nice place to be for the Spitfire. Moving on after that, though, we had the Vancouver Titans taking on the Florida Mayhem. Yeah, this is 4-0 for the Vancouver Titans. It wasn't even close. It was the Haxel Genji show, and that's about all there is to say. Yeah, that's about it, really. And then another crucial game. It was the last game of the week. It was the Boston Uprising taking on the Chengdu Hunters, I should say. Chengdu, brilliant win earlier in the week over the Fusion. A bad loss for Boston against the Guangzhou Charge earlier in the week. And this could really determine how good of a week it is for either team, and it turns out it's a really good week for Chengdu. Chengdu run out 3-2 winners. Boston, better than the performance against Guangzhou, but nowhere near where it needs to be for them to get into the play-ins. And it's starting to look really iffy now for the Uprising. They need to go on a run of wins, and it doesn't seem all that likely with the performances at the moment. It's unfortunate, but it's where we're at with the Boston Uprising right now. They are real outsiders with Toronto Defiant. So, how does that make our overall standings look? Well, Vancouver Titans are still top with 22 wins and 1 loss on the plus 60 map differential. Funny fact, they are on a higher map differential than New York were last season, and they've played less games. So, that's something. New York, they have a loss on the board, 19-3, but they are still second, and they now are sealed in the top 6, so they will be in the playoffs, although I don't think many people doubted it. San Francisco Shock remain third, so do Hangzhou in fourth, and Gladiators remain in fifth. London Spitfire on the up into sixth in that last remaining playoff spot. Shanghai also on the up into seventh. Seoul fall 2 places to eighth. But the big teller here is the 12-11 record. They are now equal with the Philadelphia Fusion. They are 2 wins behind the London Spitfire, which is where they need to be for the playoffs. 1 win behind the Shanghai Dragons. But you look at the teams below them. 10th, we have the Guangzhou Charge on an 11-12 record. That is 1 win behind the Philadelphia Fusion and Seoul. That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, I'm not saying that Guangzhou, and the same goes for Chengdu as well, they're on the same record in 10th and 11th. But I'm not saying they're going to get to the playoffs, but that's crazy that they reeled those teams in so quickly. And it's mainly because of Philadelphia losing to teams below them. But in 12th, we have the Atlanta Reign clinging on to the last remaining play-in spot. Again, their map differential is looking pretty good, so providing they can get decent wins on the board, then they should be okay. Big movers down, though. Dallas Fuel, gone all the way from 10th to 13th. They're now outside the play-ins. And looking at the coordination of the Dallas squad right now, I don't see anywhere to go but down, and that's really, really unfortunate for Dallas. It was looking like things, they might just scrape through, but now it's looking really iffy. The Valiant are in 14th. Again, they need to make sure that they keep consistency for their wins. Same goes for the Houston Outlaws. But Valiant have played 1 less game, which is in the Valiant's favour, obviously. Houston Outlaws now on a 9-14 record, equal with the Paris Eternal. That's not looking brilliant. That's not looking brilliant, and they need to start turning things around. Then you look at the Boston Uprising on an 8-15 record. That is really, really outside now. And we were talking like 2 wins behind Toronto were at the start of the stage, and that was behind, but Boston are now there. Toronto are now 3 wins behind the play-ins, which, you know, I think Toronto are pretty much out. Washington are now on 3-19 record in 19th. That's good for Washington. It keeps them above the last place. And Florida Mayhem round us off, 20th place, 2-20, and a nice round -50 map differential. Yeah, not much to say about that. There'll be a few more videos coming up. Meta discussion, possibly a news video, because there's stuff on news on the playoffs. But we will leave it here for this roundup. I'll be back with a preview of next week, which should be really darn interesting. There are some interesting games next week, especially for London and Guangzhou. So there should be really, really interesting games going on next week. But again, these standings are changing already, and we're only 1 week into stage 4. It's going to be a heck of a stage. But this video has been longer than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to leave it here. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.